like to call the May 22nd Planning Board meeting to order. The first item on the agenda are minutes from May 8th, and those are not available tonight. And we will get those from Joyce, our secretary. And the reason they're not available is because Ken usually goes over those, and Ken is no longer a member of the board. So that's one of the things we'll have to discuss next. The next item on the agenda is the planning board reorganization. Once a year, we decide who the chairman, vice chairman, and secretary are going to be. And tonight, since we have everybody here, and everybody's been sworn in?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right, okay. First, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Leary, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Dreyer for their election to the planning board. And Paul, we're glad that you're here to fill a slot. And
Thank you.
looking forward to your participation. The reorganization, we usually start out with nominations for chair, vice chair, and secretary. So at this time, I will solicit nominations for the chair.
I'd like to nominate Ralph for
Second.
chairman.
Second.
Okay, further nominations.
I'd like to nominate Pat for vice chair.
We have to do it
We're going
one
to
at a
take them one at
time.
a time.
Oh,
We'll
oh.
take them one at a time. Further nominations for chair,
Oh, for the nomination for chair.
for the chairman. Hearing none, we'll close the nominations and have a vote. All those in favor of myself for chair for 1 year, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Motion carries. Thank you very much for your confidence, and I'll be happy to serve for 1 more year. Nominations then for vice chair.
I'll
Bob,
nominate Pat.
Second.
second. Further nominations for vice chair. Hearing none, I'll close the nominations. All those in favor for Pat as vice chair, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Motion carries. Congratulations, Pat. The last nomination will be for secretary. This is the job of reviewing the minutes of our meetings and then passing them on through Joyce, I believe, to the town clerk. That's the process. And we have, so we receive copies from Melanie through the clerk to us for in draft form. We then make comments and pass them on to the clerk. The clerk then records those and has Joyce send them to the town clerk. So, do I have nominations for clerk? Pat?
I would like to nominate Doug if he would accept the nomination.
Well, you know, I had gone to the planning office a couple of weeks ago and asked the question of why the process goes as it does with, at the time Ken was doing the changes to the minutes. And I had mentioned that on other groups that I've been involved with, like namely the building committee, the recording secretary would forward the minutes. We would email back our corrections, and then she would just make the changes. And I was hoping that I would get a reply as to, you know, whether or not that's something that we would do. And I haven't heard anything
Yeah.
back.
I can speak to that because I was a clerk secretary for a number of years, and actually, the various people have set up their own ways of doing it. The question is the timeliness of getting them passed. So if you have a different format in which you would like this to happen, that would be fine.
Just trying to reduce the
The
homework.
way I used to do it is I would get the draft, I would make all the changes, and then it would be mailed out to the board.
Another significant factor is we are an elected statutory board, and we have to do everything up and above board. We can't be communicating in the background by email. We have to do it all out in public. So if there is a discrepancy or a concern that some member has with what the recording secretary has put in the minutes, it's dealt with here. So that's the primary reason in my mind.
Well, we've been doing it by email anyway.
Well,
Well, we've been receiving the draft minutes from the secretary after he or she receives them from Melanie.
And that's just a
And
correction.
then we email that person, the secretary, back.
Right.
And you're proposing us to receive them directly from Melanie and then send them to the clerk?
No,
Or the
we
secretary?
received them from Melanie, well, I don't know, we received them, I guess, from Ken, is what we were doing.
Right.
I'm just curious why the secretary doesn't just forward them to us and we send the corrections back. It's not like it's a
You mean the
debate.
recording secretary or the secretary of the planning board?
The recording secretary. I'm just curious why it's not done that way. It seems like,
Why it goes through the secretary first before it gets to us?
right, it just seems like duplication of effort.
I guess what it does is it gives him or her a chance to review them before they send them to us.
And make any
That's-
corrections.
That's one of the
Mhm.
reasons. Yeah, Rich?
for the record, I do not ever respond to anybody on this board about any board business, whether it's minutes or anything else. I've never responded on email, and I do not even open up the minutes when I get them from Ken. I expect to see the minutes here and review them here. That's the way I do it. Now, what anyone else does on this board is up to them. But I would not agree to vote for a policy of doing it any other way than having the minutes discussed here on the board, at the board meeting, and voted on that.
I don't
Anything
think,
would
I don't
change.
think Doug's asking for that. We have to discuss the minutes and approve the minutes at a meeting here, and we've always done that.
And reviewing them ahead of time, that's fine. But discussing them ahead of time, I don't think that's fine. So,
Well, it's not a discussion, it's just a correction of verbiage and what was,
back and forth on board business outside of this meeting, I believe is improper.
It
that's
is.
why I think it's best if it was directly with the secretary.
Notification, okay, you get a copy of it, and you come in here and you discuss it. That's just my view.
Well, that is why I handled it the way I did. The minutes were sent to me. I did all the corrections that I saw, sent them back to Joyce. She forwarded them to the board, so that there was none of this coming from me to each individual board member. And that is the way I handled it. So there were, at that point, there were very minimal corrections to be made when it was brought up at a meeting, and it seemed to be very efficient doing it that way. But various clerk secretaries have done it different ways, and that's all I'm saying about that.
Mhm.
I'm not patting myself on the back, it just, for me, was the most efficient way of doing it.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with looking at a more efficient way to do anything, Doug. I mean, I understand your position. It's just that as long as we comply with the open meeting law and don't discuss things amongst ourselves
Well, that's why
when we're not here.
that's what I'm saying, if the email thing is a viable option, that's why you're only sending back corrections of what you said to the recording secretary. It's not a discussion amongst the board at all. It's just a correction of,
No, but the recording secretary is pretty much out of the loop once she submits her recorded minutes to us. And then it's up to us to make the corrections, not her.
Hmm.
And personally, what I do is I get the minutes from the secretary, and I make my own comments, and then I bring them to the meeting, and then I give them to the secretary. And if there's anything other than something little, a typo or something like that, then I bring it up as a correction.
mhm.
And I assume everybody else pretty much does it the same way. So Doug has been nominated. Do I have a second?
Did you accept the nomination?
I don't want any more homework.
I'd like to
Oh,
nominate.
Is anybody that want to
Yeah.
be nominated?
Okay, all right. Wait a minute. Do I have a second for Doug?
I will say this, I would prefer Bob, for one reason only, seniority.
That's good.
you know?
I like
Right,
that idea.
If he would do it.
I don't have a second for Doug
Other than
yet.
Bob, then I had no problem
Has
with
has
the
there been a
second.
second for Doug?
No, there hasn't.
Okay.
You have a nomination,
Yes, I'd like to nominate Jim Fox,
Jim Fox.
if he would accept.
Okay,
And I will second that.
okay,
I second Mr. Brown.
You
okay.
missed that opportunity.
You can still vote. You can still vote.
We're on another, I guess you can, yeah.
Jim, would you be willing to
Yes.
serve as secretary?
Yes, I am.
Any further nominations?
We voting on?
All those?
Both have been
I'm
seconded.
going to close the nomination because there was no second for Doug.
Yes, he
Yes, it
did,
was.
at the last second.
Last
I'm sorry.
second.
You seconded Doug?
Refuse the nomination.
Yes.
Oh,
Refuse to
excuse
do
me.
so.
I didn't hear
Two
that.
nominations.
Two
It's com-
nominees.
it's
Okay, so
competitive.
I didn't
Yeah.
really.
Are there any
I'm
further-
gonna vote for Jim.
Are there any further nominations for secretary?
Doug has just said that he is going to vote for Jim. So that is
Yes.
tantamount to a...
Yes, Mr. Burke. Okay, all right. If there are no further nominations, I'm going to close the nominations. Okay, so we have two candidates, Doug Brown and Jim Fox. All those in favor of Doug Brown, raise your hand.
Thanks, Paul.
All those in favor of Jim Fox, raise your hand. Okay, Jim, you're the new secretary.
Congratulations, Jim.
Thank you for
Nothing
serving.
personal.
We have
Thank you for serving. Thank you for serving.
You ran a good race, Jim. Good job.
When I'm nominated, I always vote for myself.
Yeah?
Sure.
Just
Okay,
It's just approving.
that settles
sheet.
that.
I think I preceded you by a few weeks on the board anyways.
Yeah, you're way ahead of me. Way ahead.
A little bit
Okay.
of seniority there.
The next item on the agenda is approvals not required, and I don't believe there are any. Okay?
They're actually not required.
The next agenda on the item after that is the continuation of a public hearing, Green Cove LLC and Falmouth Air Park Homeowners Association, a modification of a definitive plan special permit to exchange 15.32 acres of open space located at Lot 18 Timothy Bourne Parkway and the Falmouth Air Park, designated open space in East Falmouth. I believe Marlene has a comment concerning this hearing.
Yep, I just want to give you an update. This was on your agenda the last meeting, and at that time, I told you that we had sent it out to the Cape Cod Commission, but they had not accepted jurisdiction yet, so I asked you to continue it till tonight. They have since accepted jurisdiction. It's a recombination and modification of land in excess of 30 acres, so they are going to take a look at it as a development of regional impact. And there's a couple of things, just so you know procedurally what's going to happen here. There's an error on your agenda. It was obviously not filed October 26th of this year. It was filed on March 5th. And this is part of this application is a definitive plan, a subdivision plan, and the planning board has 135 days to look at a definitive plan when there's no preliminary plan filed. So we're tracking a certain deadline for you. That's why you see those dates down there. When the Cape Cod Commission takes jurisdiction, your deadline stops, it's suspended. So your deadline was suspended on May 16th. So some of your time frame has passed, 41 days of your time frame has passed, but you still have 94 days to make a decision after the Cape Cod Commission finishes. So the Cape Cod Commission will do their thing. They'll send us a notice that they've finished, and they'll send us their decision, and then the planning board will pick it up again at that point. It has been advertised and the abutters have been notified, so we are treating it as, so procedurally, we still have to treat this as a hearing, even though no testimony was taken, and Paul will be able to sit on the hearing because they didn't do anything yet. So my suggestion to you is to continue this again till July. July 10th is a Tuesday. We know you'll be meeting, and at that point, Brian or I can give you another update to the status we're not expecting it to be finished yet, but we want to keep it kind of continued a little bit at a time, because when they do finish, we don't want you to eat up any more of your deadline than you need to. So our recommendation is continue the hearing until July 10th. We can give you an update.
I move it.
Second.
This discussion.
Yes.
Jim?
What's the window that the Cape Cod Commission has to deal with this issue?
They actually can take as much time as they want.
There's no limit on the window?
I don't believe so. Depending on what information they need, are asking for, once they have all the information that they've asked for, they have to act on. They can't sit on it forever, but
Could they delay it a whole, I'm just wondering if the Cape Cod Commission gets involved in a project that normally we would have to deal with in what, did you say?
135 days.
135 days, but they step into the middle, they could add a year to that process?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard.
It wouldn't do anything for their reputation. You know,
No, I just-
they're gonna,
I
they're
just-
probably gonna
it's a
move
difficult
it
process.
forward as quickly as they can, I
Clock
would think.
stops. Our
Pardon?
clock stops and.
I'm sorry?
Our clock stops and it doesn't pick up again until
Yeah.
we.
But for the applicant,
But he's concerned about the applicant.
I'm concerned when the applicant steps in, we go from 140 days to 400 if the Cape Cod Commission's.
Well, I'm sure
That's-
my guess is the applicant will be dealing with Cape Cod
I'm
Commission.
Yeah.
just trying to
Yeah.
get a feel for the process.
Right.
That's why everyone
I thought that's
designs
what I heard,
smaller.
and I did.
Okay. All right, then I need a motion, oh no, we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion on continuing the hearing for Green Cove LLC until July 10th? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. The next discussion is on the wind energy bylaw. This bylaw was emailed to us with some proposed changes. And so if you all have a copy of that, Paul, do you have a copy of that? Yes, I do. Great. Okay, it should be the one, the draft dated 5/21/12. Upper left-hand corner. So we'll start like we did the last time. We'll go through it paragraph by paragraph, starting with the purpose. There's some language in there in red that has been changed or added. So I'm just going to,
Mr. Chair,
what?
It's been proposed. I don't think we voted on that language yet.
No, I didn't say that, did I?
Oh, No,
No.
I thought you did. I thought you said it was added, but okay,
It's added to the draft.
okay,
We have, this thing is, everything is still in draft form.
all right.
Okay. And for the benefit of the public, I'm going to read that because that's the biggest change in what is being proposed here by our staff after listening to our discussion last time. The purposes of this bylaw are to accommodate wind energy systems as accessory uses of the land to supplement the power used by residents and businesses, and to protect the public and minimize negative impacts by providing standards for the placement, design, construction, location, monitoring, modification, and removal through a special permitting process for wind energy systems based on the procedures, provisions, and requirements established herein. Comments on the first paragraph? Yes, Rich?
Again, I think the language to protect the public and minimize negative impacts is surplusage. It is not necessary. I question, do we have such language in our site plan standards? Do we have such language in our subdivision rules?
You have this language already in your zoning bylaw. That,
The preamble for the zoning
Yes.
bylaw has
And
that
that's
exact
why
same
I say
language.
it's surplusage here, because it already is in the zoning bylaw.
So you're saying it's redundant?
It's redundant. It's redundant. Everything we do is to protect the public. And everything we do on any kind of regulatory control is to minimize negative impacts. And I think adding that there just sends the wrong message. What we are out here to do is not to prohibit the development of wind, but by throwing up obstacles, we are here to facilitate it in ways that we want to guide it. And there we have many protections in here built into the text of the statute that are the substantive provisions that we will apply. So I just see that as being just surplusage. It's not there, and to me, it sends the wrong message to people who we should not be trying to deter.
Okay, further comments? Doug?
I'd like to remove the language "to supplement the power used by residents and businesses," because I don't like the idea of just only supplementing the power used by a business. As I mentioned in the last meeting, I don't believe in limiting the production of the resource.
Okay, I'd like to take those two issues one at a time. Any more comments on the portion of the sentence that says to protect the public, minimize negative impacts? Any other comments? Jim?
I do agree with Richard, but, you know, the only thing is by restating it sometimes, I mean, sometimes we get off and we're talking about something and then well, someone will say, well, this has nothing to do with what the subject we're talking about, but you have to go back to the preamble of the zoning and read it to step it up. So it is a reminder for it, and it is somewhat redundant, but maybe if every time we talk about a zoning board, we go back to the beginning and not restate everything.
We take an oath of office.
Just a minute, Rich.
I'm sorry.
Other comments?
Okay, I was just commenting on it.
Other comments?
I guess I'm in agreement with Richard.
Okay. Any other comments or opinions on that? Well, then, I'd like to, for us to vote on whether or not we're going to eliminate to protect the public and minimize negative impacts. So, if there's no further comments on that, all those in favor of eliminating that portion of the sentence, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. All right, then, Arlene, we're going to drop that out.
Strike that.
Doug, would you reiterate your position on the word supplement there?
Well, it's not just the word, but the wording of "to supplement the power used by residents and businesses." I don't like the idea of limiting it to only being able to supplement the power of businesses. I'd like to see it be able to produce as
you would
much.
say that
What if it can produce more than the business uses?
Right.
I'd like to see that.
I understand that, and I believe that's addressed later on, but, okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I had similar concerns on the word supplement. I don't know why we just don't say provide. Because supplement implies a number of different conditions which may or may not be met.
Right.
So I think the purpose of it is to provide wind energy
Okay.
without confining the use of it.
So then your suggestion would be to replace the word supplement with provide?
Provide.
Okay. All right, so that's one possibility. Doug, how does that sit with what you're looking at?
I guess it's okay. It suits the purpose. The grammar wouldn't be perfect, but I'm sure they'll work that out.
Uses of the land to provide the power used by residents and businesses.
I guess
It's an adjective.
it's okay.
supposed to be
Mr. Chair,
Just a minute.
Compliment?
Uses of the land to provide. Rich, what?
yeah, I think that's even more restrictive unless we say to provide power to be used primarily by residents and businesses. That puts it in proper perspective. It does not rule out selling off some power, but to say primarily it's going to be used by the residents and the businesses.
We're talking about a primary use, that's.
And that really becomes an accessory use if it's used primarily on the location, but it doesn't prohibit selling off power that's being generated and you can't use yourself, so you sell it off.
So if we leave it this way, the purposes of this bylaw are to accommodate wind energy systems as accessory uses of the land to provide power, not the power, but power used by residents and businesses. Is that okay?
That's fine. I think you want to say, okay, yeah, but I think you would want to say to be used primarily, but, so that allows the, for the, later on, when we get into the provision about, you know, what you can, how much of it you have to keep and how much of it you can sell, whatever number we come up with, I don't think we're going to say that you have to use all of it. Then as long as we say up here, it's to be used primarily by residents and businesses, then that leaves us some room to wiggle when we talk about, well, what do you do with the extra power? You can sell some of it back to the grid, some of it, not all of it.
So you want to say, to add the words, provide primarily power used by residences and businesses?
To provide power to be used primarily by residents and businesses.
To provide power, say again, to provide power
To provide power to be used primarily.
to be
by
used.
To be used on-site, actually, by residents and businesses. Primarily to be used on-site by residents and businesses. That doesn't mean it all has
By
to be,
residents and
but
businesses.
most of it does.
Okay, Pat?
We're getting convoluted, I think. I'm
Yeah.
going back to the original purpose that we had. And if we just knock that whole part out in red, it goes right back to what we originally
There you
had.
go. That
The
sounds good to me.
reason
We can
that-
find something that,
The reason that this is put in here is because it was brought up last time, that we wanted it added in. I have in my notes to supplement power for the town residents and businesses, so it was added in by our request to add it in. But what we're trying to do right now is becoming so convoluted, and we don't want that, I think, in the purpose.
no, I agree with you.
Okay, so if we just strike everything that's in red, then the whole thing.
Except for the word location.
Yeah, but that's down below. Yeah, excuse me, okay.
Not everything that's in
So
red.
then it reads, "The purposes of this bylaw are to accommodate wind energy systems as accessory uses of the land and to provide standards for the placement, design, construction, location, monitoring, modification, and removal through a special permitting process for wind energy systems based on the procedures, provisions, and requirements established herein." That's quite concise and to the point, I think.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Now, Jim,
I just had a question, I mean, for staff, and I think Pat probably answered it, but I noticed the word supplement is in italics, so there was a special reason for inserting that into this, and I wondered, was the reason because somebody brought it up, we asked for it at the last meeting, so Pat kind of answered my question, and then I'm all set.
We also asked to protect the public and minimize impacts, that be added in. So,
Now we're taking it back.
that's why I brought my
We need to
handy
read
dandy
every
little
week.
folder along tonight.
We can't remember 2 weeks ago.
I can't either, I write it.
all right, I had spoken with Marlene today after reading this, and I said that nowhere in here have we used the word nuisance yet. And nuisance is defined in 240-110. And she recommended that if we're going to reference that it be put in the purpose, up in the purpose paragraph. And I'm just asking the board whether or not, well, let me just say that in other articles in our bylaws, we do reference other articles that are pertinent to that article, to give the reader, to lead the reader to definitions and other things that apply. So I felt as though, you know, we had pretty much decided that nuisance was going to be our sort of baseline of approving things. And there's a very good definition of nuisance in 24110. Do you have that here, Marlene?
I don't have my book, but I think Bob does.
Bob, do you have
Do you have your-
241?
Do you have your 240?
Oh, no.
You do.
Okay.
Didn't
Jim,
read
do
it.
you?
Your new package,
Yep.
right here.
Paul definitely
Paul,
has it.
okay.
Saw it right here.
Would you mind reading that, Jim? Paul, if we could borrow
Sure,
your
it's fine.
copy.
240-10.
24110?
Yeah, I know. I didn't know if you knew it was in there.
110.
24110,
24110.
definition of nuisance. And so that would be, again, you know, Rich, approaching redundancy, but it's referencing.
Cross-reference.
I
the-
don't believe it belongs in the purpose. I believe it, when you get down to wind energy systems prohibited, you add 4. No system will be permitted which would, under the standards stated in blah, 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 section,
24110.
would constitute a nuisance.
41.
That's the place to put it.
240-110.
Oh,
Even that's
240.
redundant, but that's the place to put
240-110.
it, not in the purpose.
Okay, that makes sense.
And you would want to put it in, under the next paragraph,
Yeah, under, no, 4. No system
number 4?
shall be approved which,
All right, well, before we agree to that, I would like everybody to hear what the definition of nuisance is in 24110.
Nuisances.
Nice and loud, please, Paul.
No.
Yeah,
No use shall be permitted which would be offensive because of injurious or obnoxious noise, vibration, smoke, gas, fumes, odors, dust, or other objectionable features, or to be hazardous to the community on account of fire, explosion, or any other cause. No permit shall be granted for any use which would prove injurious to the safety or welfare of the neighborhood into which it proposes to go, and destructive of property values because of any excessive nuisance qualities.
okay, everybody got that?
Yes.
So that's pretty broad, it's, you know, protection for the residents. So, if you would all agree to that, Rich has proposed that we put it on, as number 4 in the next paragraph, so I'm just gonna wait until now, and if we need to vote on purpose first, and then move on. So, we've decided that we're going to eliminate all of the verbiage in red in the purpose paragraph, with the exception of the word location. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain?
You did include you left location in.
Right.
yes.
Okay, excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just said that. Okay, now, second paragraph, wind energy systems. Although, yeah, okay. Wind energy systems. So are there any comments on that paragraph, other than the fact that Rich has suggested that we add number 4, referencing, with some appropriate language that Marlene can put in there, referencing 24110, parentheses, nuisance. Anybody else have any comments on paragraph 2?
I propose we do that, and it has to be some saving language, like nothing in the following,
Yeah,
notwithstanding.
Yeah.
Let's talk about adding a number
They
4.
you know how to write.
we'll protect you.
Reference to
I think number 4 will be a reference to 24110, parentheses, nuisance. Anything else on
I have,
that?
I have a
Doug?
question about the 100 kilowatt rating. Now, we know that we have big problems with the 1.65 megawatt.
Mhm.
That's a long ways away from 100 kilowatts.
Right.
Is really 100 kilowatts really the maximum that we can sustain? I feel like when we first started this discussion, I wanted to talk about these systems and how big they are and get to know the equipment before we get into this debate about, you know, limiting these things. We really haven't done that. That's, I guess, our own homework. The 100 kilowatts seems small to me, but I don't know enough yet to know if that's really the right number. Does anybody else have more input on that?
I tend to agree with Doug on this, and what I would like us to do right now is to leave that number X and do more study on that, because we don't have to decide that right now. We can do more study on that, and maybe 100 will be the number, and maybe there'll be room for a larger number, although it won't be a megawattage.
Right.
So I agree with Doug on that.
Well, if you go to page 2 and you look at the definitions, you're then looking at small is up to 10 kilowatts. Large is from 10 to 100, and then utility size is greater than 100.
Right.
So you're basically saying that you're not going to allow any utility scale wind energy systems.
Well,
Well,
where
that's
does
what
that-
I'm saying. I don't think we really know enough yet to pick that number. I mean, if others do, I'll defer to that knowledge, but I don't feel like I really do.
Well, first, Doug, I want to know where that number comes as far as defining what utility scale is. Is that an industry-wide accepted standard? If so, well, then maybe that's the number. But if it's not, if it's just picked out of the air as what we think is utility scale, then maybe we want to look more closely at getting some more data to back it up. Do you know what the answer to that is, Colleen?
Do you want me
Sure.
to-
Well,
Yeah.
There is, unfortunately, this would be a lot easier if there were agreed upon definitions of these different scales. That's not the case. Nobody is really in the industry coming to any sort of agreement on what constitutes. Some people use the term micro, some people use the term small, some people use the term large, some people use the term utility, and they're using those terms very freely. I do want to talk to you a little bit about rated capacity, because a lot of this bylaw is set up on rated capacity, which in itself is very difficult to use. And what rated capacity is the manufacturer on the, essentially the nameplate of the machine, gives you essentially under ideal conditions, this is the maximum power output you can expect from this machine. Now, that, of course, is a function of wind speed. And the problem with rated capacity is that every manufacturer, and it seems like the different models within the manufacturer, so a GE of this size and a GE of that size, they use different wind speeds at which to calculate their rated capacity. So one turbine might be a rated capacity of 100 kilowatts at, let's say, 10 meters per second, whereas a different turbine also rated at 10 kilowatts, did I say 10 or 100? 100. Also rated at 100 kilowatts is using 12 meters per second or 14 meters per second. So even though each machine might say its power output is the same, those functions are different because they're using different wind speeds. So we have some real problems here with rated capacity.
So there's no industry standard.
There's no industry standard.
but there,
So if we were to say, if we wanted to be really specific, then we would say 100 kilowatts, rated capacity greater than 100 kilowatts at no greater than 14 meters per second. And that's making our definition,
Yeah.
definition of that. And so then if you go to a manufacturer who says, I don't rate mine at 14, then you can't use that particular unit, you know?
Or do the conversion.
It would be really convoluted, yeah. Rich?
Yeah, or do the number we pick for the wind speed should be tied into what our normal average wind speed is, or perhaps if you want to go ultimate, the maximum normal, the upper range of that wind speed. First of all, but I agree with your approach, that becomes much less arbitrary if you say that at a certain wind speed that is rationally related to our experience here. And then the issue, you say to the applicant, you either don't use that machine, or you get them to do the conversion to our standard and certify it.
What would if we said, at 14 meters per second or less, or something like that, and so therefore we would put a cap on it? Oh, man, this is not easy.
Yeah, this is, and the other, I'm sorry, Jim, I just want to give you one more piece of information. You have to remember that Well, or you have to know that these wind speeds are the wind speeds measured at the hub height. So if you've got a turbine on the coast at essentially sea level, the hub height is different than if you have a wind turbine who's able to get up onto higher ground. So not only is it a function of wind speed, it's also a function of essentially altitude. Because if you can capture, if you can get it high enough to capture those winds, it's gonna operate better. And, I mean, Brian and I are really struggling with this too, and I think you're going along the right path here, is you have to, we can't tell you what the right answer is, there is no right answer. So, using your local knowledge on what our prevailing winds, speeds, directions are, you can tailor it to this location.
Well,
Yeah,
can't-
Jim?
can't we-
Yeah, Rich, please. Jim?
I find myself agreeing with Richard again that it should be X for right now.
Right now, yeah.
Okay, and because we do need to study it more, and I don't think that kilowatts is an important issue. I'm much more concerned about the sound, decibels, and other impacts that the neighborhood has, and not really concerned if somebody designed one that produces, that's very quiet, has a different format to it, and does 1,000 kilowatt, well, not 1,000, but you know what I mean, twice or 3 times this number, or 4 times the number, as long as it doesn't impact the neighbors. So I think we're focusing on the wrong thing when we're looking on that and protect. That has more to do with the idea we're talking about a primary use and accessory use. So we can cover that issue there. And for now, I think this should be X until we figure it out a little further.
Okay, so to leave it blank then is probably what we're pushing for, Paul?
I had some concerns also with that, because when I looked at the bylaw, I thought we should be talking about size and type and location, not necessarily the operation. Now, if we were to permit a turbine that's just under this amount, and some technological changes occur and you exceed that amount, what do? Do you shut them down? If you look at the Vestas website, they list onshore turbines from 850 kilowatt to 3 megawatts. So they don't even show anything in this range, 100 kilowatts, which is relatively small.
No.
So
Okay.
I don't think I'd put X, I think I'd take out the reference
Yeah.
to the number of kilowatts and try to deal with it with the more appropriate things I think the planning board should be dealing with: size, type, location, and impacts, rather than the operation of the unit itself.
So you would strike the whole, the whole sentence under number 1?
Yes.
Rich?
I don't have a problem with that, except then 2 becomes 1, 3 becomes 2, and 4 becomes 3. But
That's okay.
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, what Paul is saying makes sense to me, as long as we do the protection that we're supposed to do. The capacity, and by the way, if it, like Jim says, if somebody can produce higher kilowattage with a much quieter machine, that's the kind of thing we want to encourage people to try to do.
Right.
Whereas if we just simply limit it to 100, then where's the incentive to make a quieter machine that can produce more?
Bob?
Yeah, I agree with striking that too, because we're getting into the whole energy consumption, energy production thing. And I agree with Paul that we should be dealing more with heights of towers, blade throw or ice throw, and those types of issues, decibel levels, things like that. Manufacturer's specifications. And every manufacturer has certain setback requirements for their machine. And I think that's what we need to get away from this, how much energy is it producing, to the physical plant itself.
Doug?
And I would suggest again that we look into the Small Wind Certification Council and see what they consider small, and maybe that can give us some guidelines as to what's industry standard for small.
What's the reference?
if you just, you can just go
Does
to
one-
SWCC.
Does our staff have a copy of that?
Yeah,
Okay. So now, then we're talking about definitions. Now you're moving into the
Well,
definitions.
I'm just saying it's a reference point for trying to determine what is the upper limit of small.
Right. Okay, well, we're gonna get to that in a minute. Okay, so then, is it pretty much a consensus then that we strike the sentence numbered 1 and then renumber the others? And are there any other comments on the others? Other sentences are
On the others, those 4 sentences,
3 now.
those 3 sentences, no.
Okay.
Number 1 should be the reference to 240, 110.
Well, you could make
And then-
number 1, 240, 110, and
Yeah.
leave 2 and 3 there.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Musical
All right.
chairs.
I think number 2 and number 3 are covered by accessory definition, actually. Because the
They
accessory
are.
definition is defined at 51%, and I think this is redundant as well.
Well, we use the word accessory, Paul, in the purpose,
Mhm.
and then we also are using it in prohibited, in a negative way, and then it's mentioned, of course, in the definition is under definitions. Previously, we had definitions before this, and the staff suggested that we move definitions down. I think we'll just, for now, we're gonna leave it that way, and there's an emphasis definitely here that accessory is the allowed uses for wind turbines in Falmouth. Pat?
I think we have gotten into trouble historically, where we haven't been clear enough in our bylaws as to what was meant. So for now, I would like to see this left in. We may, at a future date, determine to take it out. But right now, we're saying right up front that this is what we mean for the ones that will not be allowed. When you go to definitions, well, you can start fooling around with definitions a little bit too. Does one modify another? So I think we need to leave this right here. We may decide to modify some of the statements.
Which one are you talking about?
That's the wind energy systems prohibited. We need to leave
Number
that
2.
category in there.
Okay.
Okay.
For now, I think it makes sense to leave it, and we'll come back to it.
If we want to just make a note that maybe we did agree to no more 1.65 megawatt turbines in Falmouth. We
Yeah.
did agree that they won't fit. If you want to keep a note in there to reassure the public that we're not backtracking on that.
Yeah.
Well, you might, I don't think that's gonna cut it, because if somebody comes up with 1.45, that's probably not gonna be acceptable
I
either.
agree, I just meant as
Yeah.
just a symbolic,
I'm hoping that we're getting enough publicity through our TV coverage and the press that people won't think we're going backwards on this, and that we're dealing with future use of wind turbines. Arlene?
I just want, excuse me, I just want to explain why this sentence is in here. And it is redundant, and it's intentionally so, because as of right now, there's no agreement on your accessory definition.
Right.
So once you have written your definition of what you mean by accessory, then it may be appropriate to come back and take this out, certainly. But right now, we don't have that nailed down yet.
Right.
So it's kind of a placeholder.
Right. Okay. All right, the next paragraph is when.
Mr. Chair, can I make a
Yes.
comment? There's a very interesting article in the Globe yesterday about the state requiring reviews of wind turbines. And there were 2 things that caught my eye in there. One was that of the 54 wind turbines of 100 kilowatts or larger operating in Massachusetts, 17, including the 2 in Falmouth, use an older generation of technology that makes them louder.
Oh.
I had not seen that before.
Yeah.
And secondly, it goes on to say that the state officials are looking for a new regulatory scheme for wind turbines. So if they're moving forward with regulatory scheme, I don't know if we want to get ahead of them or not.
That's one thing that we're gonna have to deal
So
with.
we're going to have to think about.
We've been
the-
waiting and we've been
schedule
waiting
of
for
it.
other studies to come out prior to our deliberations here. And so it's, we may run into a delay on that. Pat?
Yeah, I'd like to bring Paul up to date on this. We asked for an original moratorium. We asked for an extension of it. That's the last we have. We have that till Springtown meeting. If we do not put something into place by then, it reverts to what's currently in our bylaws, which calls them windmills and,
I mean, fall town meeting, don't you?
no. we
The
have until
moratorium
spring-
is-
The
yeah.
moratorium goes
But
until
we're
spring.
planning to prevent.
Absolutely.
We're planning to present this bylaw at fall town meeting, if all goes well. And that's, who knows if that'll be the case, but we want to do our homework and have something available for the public.
But that's what's
By fall.
pushing us.
Right.
To get something in place and not waiting any further, which we have been doing.
Right.
For the state and the county and.
Okay. So wind energy systems allowed with limitations. There are two places where red language is there, and it says that small wind energy systems will be permitted by the Board of Appeals, and large wind energy systems will be permitted by the Planning Board. So then you have to go to your definitions, and we had discussed this. Last time, we had voted that it was 5-1, I believe, that we wanted the planning board to be the permitting authority. But the staff is suggesting that we possibly split it and make the smaller systems, which might be more, there might be a larger number of, there might be, come before the Board of Appeals, and the larger systems come before the planning board. So discussion on that. Pat?
One of the pushing factors in our saying that we wanted it to stay right here with our board is that this is a new and controversial bylaw, and we wanted to keep it here in all of its types of permitting, so that we could understand better what the problems with it might be, at least for the near future. I don't think I'd like to see it split. Excuse me, split between two boards. Even if it is split by sizes, I think I'd rather see all permitting in one board or the other, and preferably with our board.
I agree.
Other comments? Doug?
I'm in agreement with that, that's what we decided.
I would just like to hear from Marlene what the rationale is. Has it got to do with Board of Health, more greater concern in residential districts?
Has nothing to do with the Board of Health. It's that the zoning board of appeals is really better equipped, or I shouldn't say they're better equipped, but they're more used to looking at the small details of projects than the planning board is. The planning board special permits are generally town-wide in scope. There are things like senior care retirement districts where you might have hundreds of units. There are contractors' yards where you might have large traffic impacts. You guys tend to look at the big picture stuff, and the zoning board tends to be more focused on the little special permit stuff that we have, nonconformities and those areas. We're not saying that you can't do it or that you wouldn't do a good job, but the zoning board is used to looking at things on that scale. You guys are used to looking at things with larger impacts, and it's a different way of thinking.
Yes,
Site
Bob?
plan reviews.
Rich, please?
If that's the case, then I think we should choose one board or the other. I don't think we should split it. I think it should be one board or the other.
Okay, Rich?
We do site plan reviews. That's very, very, very particular, very, very local.
But for all developments over a certain size, you do site plan reviews. There's a trigger. You
Right.
don't do site plan reviews, you only do them for commercial and industrial. and you only do them multifamily residential, and you do them over a certain size. And then the zoning board does special permits on, single-family
We do
houses.
small subdivisions. If somebody comes, we do approval not required,
No,
up to
we-
the line.
we need more
I'm just making
discussion.
the point here, that we do a lot of small stuff.
I understand your point. Jim?
I think Pat's onto something. I think in the beginning, we should hold on to it, and maybe as we move down the road and become more familiar with it, we delegate it out.
Yeah.
Because right now, first of all, how many of these small turbines have even been applied for or being done? There's really not that many.
We have about a dozen.
Right, I think it would be informative for us to go through that and learn that process and understand it all. And if it becomes very obvious that we're wasting our time, we delegate.
So you're advocating that we,
For now, we do them
for
all.
now, we do with them all, and then change the bylaw later, not revisit this before we present it to the public?
So that would be a bylaw change that requires 2/3 meeting of town just to make that delegation switch, huh?
Right.
Let me just.
That's not a policy issue?
Let me just interject here. That's exactly what you did for the lot coverage. There was a big switch on how, in the smaller zoning districts, the Ag B, the residential B and C, there was a big policy switch saying, we're going to limit your lot coverage by structure to 20% with a special permit up to 25%. And for the first couple, well, I don't know how long it was, maybe 7 years or so of operation, the planning board did that. And then the planning board decided, this really is something that the zoning board should be doing. You went to town meeting and you changed that delegation. You delegated that special permit. So there is a precedent for that.
But we delegated it with the understanding that the zoning board of appeals agreed to accept it. We didn't just dump it on them.
Right,
okay?
yeah.
So we don't just say, okay, we're tired of this, you do it. We consult with them. Bob?
If we are the primary board that hears these, then someone does have relief in the Board of Appeals, is that correct?
No. Your decisions are appealed
That's
to
it?
court,
Okay.
not to the zoning
Okay.
board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, Rich?
Politically, it's a lot easier to delegate out authority than it is to claim authority. So, just politically, it would be a lot easier for us later on to say, well, we think the Board of Appeals should be handling these, than it would be to say, well, we want to grab that power back from the Board of Appeals now. That's just politically easier to do. And it's easier to get the Board of Appeals to agree to accept something than to give up something. That's true in any kind of system.
Well, what you're saying, Rich, is right now, windmills are under the jurisdiction of the zoning board of appeals. So you're saying that it would be easier to leave it there rather than to us take it back, and take back, since we're talking about wind turbines instead of windmills, but they're basically the same thing, you're saying it's more difficult for us to take it back than for us to leave it there. Is that what you're saying?
Like Bob says, it should be a single permitting authority. I have no preference. If we can make a case that it should be the planning board doing it, and if the zoning board of appeals agrees with that, well, then fine. If the zoning board of appeals doesn't, wants to make a floor fight over that, well, it's going to be very difficult to get anything across. I think maybe we should be talking with the ZBA about this issue before we make any decision. I think we should, in fact, maybe send them a referral, just asking them what their preference is.
Pat?
First of all, the windmill bylaw is relatively short, and it's not anything like we're putting together here. We're pulling this together out of whole cloth, if you will. It's new, it's entirely new. We would be asking town meeting to get rid of what is currently there in its entirety and bring this something that is brand new in and voted in. And in that case, I think it's called for to have the determination of it stay with this board until we have enough experience with it, just like we did with lot coverage, to see what we were getting, that it was repetitive, that everything, all bases were covered. And that's my point here. This is something that is brand new, that we don't have a lot of experience out there over this country and the world as to what might be coming forth. We are, as Paul brought up, going to be looking at potential state guidelines that then we might have to bring this into conformance with. At some point, who knows, 2, 3, 4 years down the way, but the more it stays here, where it's devised, the better off I think we are.
Yeah, I'm going to make a comment. I have to agree with Pat. I tend to lean towards the planning board being the permitting authority in the beginning, because we've done the research, we're going to do the public hearings, our staff is well-versed in it and have done research, and to ask the zoning board of appeals to all of a sudden be the permitting authority for something that is brand new in scope, not the fact, they have permitted a large turbine in town already, which is controversial. Politically speaking, it might be better if we designated the planning board as the permitting authority in the beginning, to give the public some confidence that we did the research, we did the deliberations, and therefore we're willing to be the permitting authority. Rich?
You took the words out of my mouth in that our staff, by the time we're done with this process, our staff will have the expertise on this particular substantive context, more so than the ZBA or any other board in town. So that's the answer right there.
Well, we need to decide. I would prefer not to put this off, and if you absolutely feel that we need to consult with the zoning board of appeals on this before we agree to it, then I need to know that now. Because otherwise, I would like the board to make a decision tonight as to whether or not, who's going to be the permitting authority. Jim?
Well, if I'm correct, I thought it was our job to write the zoning and the zoning board of appeals to administer it. And I think if we're writing it, I think we should write it for now for us to do it, and that's our job, which basically I'm agreeing that we should take full charge for it and work on the special permit process for it. And I think we don't have to, my point is, I don't think we have to go to a referral to the zoning board of appeals on how we're writing the zoning law. That's our job to come up with it first.
Okay. Doug?
I think we should keep it here and only do the referral if we intend to ask them to handle it.
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
I agree.
Okay, so then, all right, then I'd like us to vote then as to whether or not, let's see, let me word this right, that the permitting authority for all wind turbine proposals be the planning board. So that would be the motion, if I could get a motion like that.
I move
So-
it.
I'll second it.
Okay, a motion and a second that the planning board be the permitting authority for all wind turbines proposed under this bylaw. Any further discussion?
Good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. Marlene? I
Yep,
think we've made a decision
on the permitting granting authority.
on the permitting.
Yeah, there's a lot more information here that you need to talk about in these couple of points.
You mean under this particular paragraph?
Yeah. I need you to talk about the districts, the zoning districts.
As to whether or not you want to,
Whether or not you agree with these.
you mean small allowed in those particular districts and large
Yeah,
in the light industrial districts in
Yeah.
public use?
yeah.
Okay, so comments on that? Pat?
Okay, what we're looking at here, let's look at number 1. Because number 2, we may not have any disagreement with, but in number 1, you have single residence A and double A, okay, 40,000 square feet.
No,
No,
45 and 80,
45 and 80, thank you. And then Ag A and double A,
the same.
the same, okay. Somehow I had that stuck in my head as 40 and 80. And business 2. Well, we're getting pretty small here. When you're talking about a 45,000 square foot lot, you've got a whole subdivision, and you can go up to 10 kilowatts. The ones that are 10 kilowatts are the one on Fay Road, the high school, the Falmouth Academy, and Coonamessett Farm. They're all on much larger pieces of property, I believe.
But they're all within those zoning districts.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, they are. They're in the double A, I believe, aren't they?
Yeah, Fay Road is residential double A, Coonamessett Farms and the high school are ag double A, and then the academy's the business too.
But the academy also has quite a lot of property with it,
It
too.
does.
So we're looking here, I think, at minimal lot size rather than zoning districts. And what I'm trying to say is the sizes that are associated with the single residence and Ag A, they're too small. And B2, there are a lot of lots that are gonna be way too small to incorporate. Maybe the smaller ones they can handle, but the 10 kilowatts, there might be some objection to these. Public use, it's probably okay because most of the public use lots are larger. Light industrial zoning, yeah, that's gonna be most likely large enough to accommodate the small ones. But when you're talking about a 45,000 square foot lot, that's getting a little bit too small to accommodate.
So you would say you would not include them as eligible for a small wind energy system?
Correct.
And that would be resident A and double A? Is that what you said? No,
Residence A.
Residence
And
A.
Ag A.
and ag A.
But I also think that what we're looking for here is not just a zoning district. We're going to be looking for lot size and setbacks.
So then-
That's
so then-
something I need to tell you. I need to
Okay.
tell
Wait,
you about.
hang on, Rich, go ahead and explain to us.
Okay, we've talked before about uniformity, and if you're going, and what that means is that everything within a zoning district, you always have to think in terms of zoning districts. Everything within a zoning district has to be treated the same. So you can't bifurcate single residence A or Ag A and say, well, you can do it in single residence A if you have an oversized lot of X. So it's essentially, you essentially have to toss it all or keep it all. You can't have zoning, you have to treat all single residence A land the same. I mean, and we have tons of examples about this, like, single residence B land, our zoning bylaws says that it's a 40,000 square foot minimum lot size. We all know that single residence B is much smaller in reality. Those are the lots west and south of 28. So we know that your minimum lot sizes don't necessarily reflect reality in all cases, but you have to kind of put up that imaginary blinders, and you have to, if you're gonna go in a district, it's either all in or all out.
Rich?
Chairman?
Yeah, we are talking about a zoning bylaw. And so what we're talking about here is what zones, what uses are permitted. Now, when we look at what, I have some problem with limitation on large wind energy systems, but that doesn't apply to this specific issue. When we're talking about small wind energy systems, we've given a range, 0.03 to 10 kilowatts. So within that range, we can say small wind energy systems with that rated capacity between there, with a rated capacity somewhere in there, will be allowed in these districts. But we can, within that, say, well, if you're in a residential district and we're talking about a lot size that is 45,000 square feet and it is, abutted by many other lot sizes of 40,000 square feet, we can say, hey, you can have a small wind energy system, but we're going to limit it to 0.4 or 4 kilowatts. And it's still within the definition there, and It's not being inconsistent. We're saying that that's a small system, but we can cap the capacity of that small system based upon other considerations that will be spelled out in the bylaw, won't have to be spelled out.
Where you're getting to proximity.
Right.
Yeah, Jim?
I believe lot size is appropriate, and there is a pattern with it. When you're trying to do a contractor's yard in a double-A zone, you can't do it on 2 acre, you need 5 acres. So I think that what Pat is suggesting, that looking at the lot size is appropriate and goes along with the way we already practice our zoning. So I think that if, for instance, if you had a residential double-A lot and you had 5 or 10 acres, you should be able to have one of these. But if you have a residential lot and it's 40,000 square feet, you shouldn't be able to have one of these. So I think the lot size is really, really important, and it is consistent with the special permit that we do for a contractor's yard already.
I'm
You need
not-
5 acres for that.
You do. I'm not sure that would pass the Attorney General. There's a lot of things in, like all of the dates, 1981 and those things, there were a lot of things that would get thrown out by the AG's office now. I'm telling you the most conservative route you need to take to make sure it passes the Attorney General.
So our contractor's yard would get thrown out now?
If it passed today, most likely, yes. Just like all of those bylaws.
That's what I was using as a model.
Would get thrown out now.
Paul, did you have something? No. Doug?
So, I think I understand your concern, Pat, but I think we're limiting this, again, we're tying the hands of business. Agricultural AA, for instance, Coonamessett Farm, as you mentioned, they have a 10 kilowatt now, but it's not doing what he needs. He'd like to upgrade it to 50, and he's got the tower built for it. Right now, he's got 10 kilowatts of wind power and 10 kilowatts of solar panels. He ends up with 30,000 per year. And he
30,000
uses
what?
kilowatts of electricity produced by the wind and renewable energy. He uses 80,000. He'd like to change that 10 kilowatt to 50 kilowatt. And he's got the area, and he's got the tower, everything in place. And here we are already precluding that by limiting this agricultural AA to 10 kilowatt. I think we're thinking too small with the numbers. I know it's scary, but I think we're being too limiting.
Well, so then you're getting into
I'd
not
like
so
to-
much lot size, but you're getting back spilling over to the definitions, which we
yeah.
haven't addressed yet.
Okay, well,
And
I guess
I'm
that's true.
guessing that maybe,
Oh, well,
maybe we're going by this the wrong way. Maybe we should be going through definitions first. Rich?
Yeah, again, if we say that a small wind energy system may be permitted in these zoning districts, and then we say a small wind energy system means a wind energy system that produces between a certain range, and maybe the upper limit of the range could even be larger, if we look at it. But a small wind energy system means within this range. So you have a small lot, the rest of our regulations will effectively restrict within that range. So you can still have a wind energy system, but it might have to be a lot closer to .03 than whatever the upper limit is.
Right.
And that's perfectly fine as far as the regulation goes, because you can put it in, but it has to be down towards the lower end of the range if you've got a smaller
If you
lot.
can't meet those other standards.
If you can't meet those other standards, that's what it's gonna be.
Yeah.
So you still get your wind energy system, take it or leave it, with those limitations.
Well, we need to, as we go through this process, we need to continue to make this, take it out of its draft form and, paragraph by paragraph, so to speak, and make decisions on these things. We can't keep putting them off and I mean, we're deliberating it now, and that's what, we need to make some decisions now. Jim?
Just a quick question, I need to understand, you're saying that we cannot use lot size as a determination?
You can't use a lot size that's different than what you've said your zoning district's minimum lot sizes are.
Right.
So you've said,
So the answer is yes, we cannot use lot size for.
there's a lot size associated with these. You
Right.
have to use that size.
We can't apply two different
Different standards,
criteria,
okay, 'cause-
You got one criteria to apply.
Yeah.
And that happens to be the lot size. Rich?
Yeah, I think what we need to do, Ralph, is we need to get some hard, fast, more information that will answer Doug's question and Jim's question and mine as well, as to what the upper limit should be for both the small system and the large system. I'm not entirely satisfied with the large wind energy system at 100, and from what Doug's saying, maybe 10 isn't that reasonable for the small. But so what we need to do is we need to get, and fast, some better data than what we have as to what we could expect. But again, as I said, as long as we say all of these districts, are allowed to have the small system, as long as we have a lower limit that we can live with, then when we're talking about lot size, if somebody has a small lot, well, they can get the minimal system in there, and there's no problem with us looking at the lot size, not in terms of an arbitrary figure, but in terms of, well, can you meet the setbacks to meet these standards? And if you can't meet those setbacks to meet the standards, well, then you're not gonna get a bigger system. All you're gonna get is a little system.
Well, I think what we're looking at here is, are we comfortable with the different zones that are included in the paragraph number 1? Are those the zones, the different zones that we feel would be appropriate for small systems regardless of how we define them? I mean, is that a good grouping, so to speak? Are you satisfied with that?
Yeah.
Doug?
I am.
I don't think so. I think agricultural AA, business, and where's B1? Is that the industrial? When you go to the large, all we have is public use, light industrial.
Yeah.
No business, no B1. I mean, B1, you wouldn't really want it anyways, but I'm just,
They tend to be near, on main roads.
yeah, I guess
The one
that's
on
true.
Main
You
Street.
wouldn't want it there, but I'm just saying,
Back at
that would be
So-
too exclusive.
So what's your position here? What do you,
Agricultural AA, that's what, 80,000 too? Maybe, should that be in the large wind? Maybe we should have medium wind.
See,
Bob?
I have trouble with determining it by the amount of energy it puts out. It'd be like having two cars. One puts out 400 horsepower, the other 200, and you're only going to allow the 200 horsepower. To me, it should be radiuses, the footprint, all the physical attributes of the unit itself, and not how much power it puts out. I just have trouble with that.
And for that matter, I mean, we're micro-thinking it and trying to think of
Yeah.
every possible scenario, which we're never gonna really do anyway. We could use the state's generic thing that they sent out, and we'd be in business next week. Each one is site-specific anyway. I think we're gonna keep chasing our tail, trying to figure out all the possible scenarios. And we're excluding things as we go along.
Marlene, comment?
Yeah, I just want to explain the size of these turbines are the criteria that we've got in here. And it is common to consider the rated capacity the size. And we're doing that because we need to tie this to a land use somehow. In zoning, everything has to be considered a land use. So the size of the turbine, in order for it to be an accessory land use, there has to be a relationship. The relationship is the power. It's used on one side, generated on the other. So that's the relationship between the principal and the accessory land use that we have. So the size of the turbine has to meet all of these other criteria that we haven't even started talking about yet. But in order for it to be in order for us to be able to determine whether or not a turbine can even apply, it needs to talk to us in terms of power usage and power generation and the relationship of that. That's why we have this, that's why we don't the rated capacity, I told you, we have major problems with rated capacity. Unfortunately, we have no good alternative. And the rated capacity is the power generated at a certain point on the power curve that gives us a number that we can relate to the power used. And otherwise, we can't determine whether or not something is accessory. And we can't determine whether or not somebody's even eligible to apply to you for a permit.
Okay, Jim?
I have a couple of questions on other language that relates to special permits. We're getting real specific here, but there's some general language that I know when I've gotten special permits in front of the zoning board. It talks about impacts on the neighborhood, views and vistas. There's a standard package that says.
214, right,
Right.
240-214.
Do they all going to apply to this as well?
Yes.
Okay, now that gives us a little bit more control on some of these things. Now I understand, because if the lot's too small, even though it's in the zoning and they could have it, if the lot's too small, it's gonna have an impact, it's not gonna fit that other paragraph, and therefore we're back in control again. So we don't have to make this one paragraph be the stop of the whole thing. There's a whole series of other language that falls in place on the smaller lots. Am I correct? So that we needed, maybe if you would read that to us, so, or, so we have that.
I don't
Or
have
the
my
next
book,
time we go
yeah.
through it, when
Yeah.
we're arguing about these issues, because I think that's gonna run out and catch all these other issues that we're talking about, and give us a little comfort.
Well, we're discussing it, we need to decide whether or not grouping those particular zones for small wind energy systems, regardless of how we define them, is what we want. We need to decide.
I think my
Whether
point
that
is, that's
grouping
gonna
is-
be okay if you understand we have other controls that are in place on this, and if they're really such a small lot that it doesn't fit, they can't do it.
So you're saying leave this?
I think it works, because
okay.
there's other language that solves the problem that's being brought up. We're trying to fight too hard. I think the general language covers it.
Well, then if we go to number 2, and we're talking about the larger wind systems, and we're basically restricting them to light industrial zones and zones of public use. Are you comfortable with that?
I guess so. I mean, if nobody else thinks that the agricultural AA doesn't belong in that small, I guess I'm ready to move on.
All right.
So what we need to do then is, we should just have one of these items as the permitting board, and then the other one, small for those zones, and large for the other zones would be the other 2 items.
Yeah, you can combine the
Yeah, we
language.
can
Yeah,
rework the
okay, rework the
structure.
language, yeah.
Okay.
Pat?
I think what's missing here, and you referred to that, Jim, is we're only getting a very small part of the
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah.
As to, I think important is going to be the decibel levels, the setbacks, and that we haven't even attempted to define at this point in time. I think we
Limitations.
all feel more comfortable once that is done. Problem is, again, they're all over the board as to what various communities require, both for setbacks and decibel levels. So we're we're deriving this with what we can read, what we can gather, but we're making our own decisions here. And I think I'm okay with this currently, except I think residence A and Ag A the lots are too small. But if we start throwing in DBs and setbacks, there you go.
Views and
because-
vistas, all kinds of other
Yeah.
language that come in later on.
Because where they may not be appropriate for a 10 kilowatt, they might be fine for a .3.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, moving on to the next paragraph, definitions. Now, here, what we're saying is that we're going to have our own definitions in this bylaw, and they're not going to be in the general definition paragraph for the zoning bylaw. Rich?
We didn't deal with the third item here, are the wind energy systems allowed?
Oh, excuse me. Okay, does anyone have something that they'd like to discuss about item number 3 under that?
I have a question, sir.
Yes.
Why do we use the term "only"?
I'm sorry, what's that again?
3, it says "may only be permitted."
When
Why-
accessory to a principal use, gotta go, because we've already decided they're gonna be accessory.
Wind energy systems may only be permitted
May be
when
permitted.
necessary to
Yeah.
principal use that has been in existence and operation for at least 2 years. So are you,
I'm just wondering why we use the term "only," why not just say "may be permitted"?
If I can explain our thinking here and giving you this language, what we're trying to grapple with is this difficulty with the rated capacity. So the word "only" there is really important because we're saying you have to have a building that's been up and running for at least 2 years so you can give us real data. This is not allowing a wind turbine to come in as part of a new proposal. This means that a building has to be built and operational, and then they come in for a wind turbine. And the reason we want to talk to you about this is that once, like, this town hall would be considered in this town a fairly large office building. It's over 10,000 square feet. It would be a DRI,
Cape Cod
Development
Commission.
Regional Impact. And if town hall was being built today, we would essentially be guessing at what size turbine we need. We talked Brian talked at length with the electrical inspector, and we understand the loading calculations for under Mass Building Code that we talked about last time and how to get to that. Those calculations don't actually tell you the actual usage. It's a calculation that's done to determine whether or not it's suitable under building code for essentially a minimum performance. Now, when you have real kilowatt usage, like August is the month that town hall uses the most power. In August, the town hall uses about 36 kilowatts of power for the month of August. Now, if we have real data that shows what is the maximum power we want to offset every year, and it's consistently about 36 kilowatts, then you can do your calculations for accessory and determine, okay, well, then an appropriate turbine size is about double that. If we go with the definition we have right now, and I know that's not settled. And the other side of that is, so actual usage helps you determine your turbine size. And then the other side of that is that when someone's actually going through and kind of picking out their turbine, they will be able to provide you with this power curve that I've been talking about. So you won't have to rely on nameplate capacity. You will see, you'll see the entire curve, and you'll see at what wind speed, and you can determine, okay, this is a wind speed that this site is generally, will generally experience at this time of year, and you can match the two. So if your peak power usage is in August, but your power generating curve is based on a wind speed that we only reach in February, you're not matching right. You're not matching your generator to your demand. So when people are going through this permitting process, they need to be able to tell you they've put up a Met tower and they've done the calculations, they know what their wind speed is, they know the maker and model of the turbine they're proposing, they have the power curve, and then you can say, okay, well, it looks like we're comfortable saying this is accessory based on your definition because we know how much you need, we know how much you're going to generate, and and it's within that range, that 51% or whatever the percentage is. If you're doing that before you have real numbers, it is a guess. It's a real guess.
So, Doug?
I'm so against this whole power limitation concept and trying to figure out how much power they're gonna use. Who cares? Figure out how big the thing is, how much noise it's gonna make, and how it's gonna impact the neighborhood. And let it produce as much wind as possible. I mean, as much electricity. We're gonna just add a whole nother layer of bureaucracy to the whole process. And a business plan can't come in with a turbine in place to go with it? I don't know. I just think we're just mired in paperwork.
Well, I think that, from what I've seen, at any time they're doing a wind turbine plan, that they do put up these towers, that's the standard practice when they put them in. Even when the town did theirs, they had the sample there. I've seen them out in Horseshoe Shoals. I believe that doing the study, understanding the site, and having a delay of a couple years or until you build the profile is the appropriate way to do it. And I think, Doug, you can still accommodate your issue, but as far as doing a real study and understanding what the site has and matching it to the site, I think that's real important.
Well, no one does it without doing that. I'm just saying, though, that,
So we're gonna see those numbers, and then we can make the decision.
yeah, but it doesn't have to take 2 years.
Yeah, I had a question about the 2 years, too. I thought you could do it in a year. Rich?
I agree with Jim on this, that it not only helps, it actually helps the applicant because they can justify a larger system than they might otherwise under more arbitrary kinds of limits, while at the same time it does give us some kind of control or ability to limit, which I think we need to have. So that strikes a nice balance. I'm not sure about 2 years or 18 months, whatever, but let's recognize that this will, with this kind of thing, if we pass this will allow a lot of people who are holding off, who have been holding off, on existing sites, existing businesses, to start applying, because they will have their utility records going back 2 years.
But why do we need to limit the electricity?
What we want to do is the size of turbines that we're going to allow, and is definitely connected to the need for the power. So we don't want to be allowing larger than we need to allow turbines because of other concerns. We're trying to balance here the need to get into wind and other alternative energy sources to limit the consumption of fossil fuels. At the same time, we don't want to turn the whole town into a power generating station. So we need to have some control over it. And the best controls you can have are rationally related to actual conditions rather than arbitrary. And this strikes a balance. To me, this strikes a balance to say that, well, people who have been in existence for 2 years, they can come in with their utility bills. They can start building these things in December after we pass this bylaw. They can start permitting them. People who are just starting up a business, well, they can do their homework before they come in. They can, do their site homework and all of that. And then when they come in, when they're ready to show what their power needs are, they will be able to, at least as opposed to having some kind of arbitrary standard, they will be able to maximize it within the context of what they need. Your friend there who needs, 50 kilowatts, he's only getting 30 now with what he's got, would be able to justify getting the bigger turbine.
Unless we exclude it with some prohibited
Yeah, but you
language.
said he has plenty of acreage, so it's not that likely
I
that.
know, but we're already well.
Oh, no, I'm with you on upping that 10 kilogram. I'm with you on upping that. So, but that's the different issue.
Right.
I think that the need to show, the requirement that you show you have the need for the extra power makes sense, and the best way to do that is to show the experience in terms of your demand.
Yes, Bob?
So are you saying that we would have to do a study, anybody applying would have to do a study as part of the application process. They would have to put up a test.
Met tower.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll have to do
so,
some wind speed data, and
so do you think the average homeowner that would want to put a wind turbine on the property, they wouldn't be able to do something like that?
Sure they do.
They do?
They do. The wind turbine manufacturer does it for them.
Okay.
I mean, these things are not cheap. If you're gonna invest this kind of money, you wanna make sure you're getting what you need.
And that's exactly my point. If you're gonna base it on their electric bill, they're not gonna happen, because it's a huge investment.
There might be a solution to Doug's issue, and this is where I think we could modify this, is our definition of accessory. Doug, if we change the 51 to a greater number, that would also solve the issue you're talking about. You're talking about that they can't produce enough? I mean, if we, I'm not tied to the 51, I just don't want to see them be 110. You know what I mean?
Why not?
Well, because then they're not, then we have power plants business, and it becomes a business, becomes a primary use, and that's,
Well, I mean,
well, it depends. If we get stuck on primary and accessory, we got to decide, we got to vote on one and move
You
forward.
took that vote 2 weeks
We already,
ago.
I was going to say, we already took the vote.
I agree, but the definition of accessory, I don't understand why it has to be tied exactly to an electric bill. How about this for a definition of accessory? The electricity produced will not exceed the income of the current business. Nothing to do with the electric bill.
Ralph, can
I'm
I?
just saying, it's still not primary use until you're making more money with the tower than you are with your landscape business.
Yeah, we can't.
We are not tying this to a bill. We're tying it to usage,
Right.
meter reading.
to a meter reading.
Right.
Not a bill.
Yes, not a bill, not a dollar.
It's not a dollar figure.
It's tied to the usage,
Right.
not a bill.
Well, the usage comes on your bill. That's how you keep track of it.
Yes, but it's the meter reading, not the
It's
dollars.
the meter reading.
Right.
Because the
Okay.
other thing's too
right.
flexible.
Doug, I was giving you a solution to move forward here by going, getting you more on one end, but if you have to go back and revisit the accessory and primary, we're going backwards.
Right.
We've already voted that a couple of weeks ago.
I'm not trying to undo the vote. I'm just saying that these limits are,
Well, I think the way to help you with that, and I agree with you, is push that 51 to a higher number.
okay, well, let's keep going.
Well, all right, is everybody comfortable with the operational for at least 2 years? Is that okay? Is that reasonable? Is it,
What's the logic for 2 years as opposed to, say, 1 year?
I'm sorry?
What's the logic, 2 years as opposed to,
Well,
say, 1
I
year?
don't, I'm guessing that over 2 years, you're getting a
Stabilize.
better average, you know? You're, you know, if you have an unusual meteorological year, it could screw the whole thing up.
Yeah, we were looking for, like, for office-type buildings, we're looking for at least 2 summer cooling seasons. And for manufacturing buildings, we're looking for, if there's certain peaks of production, we're looking for that to be, evened out.
Okay, let's go on to definitions then, because this is the tricky part. We looked at the definition of accessory, and we had issues about the percentage. And we did add on a yearly basis in there, and I don't think anybody has a problem with on a yearly basis. For the purposes of this article, accessory shall mean no less than 51% of the electricity produced by the wind energy system shall be utilized by the principal use located on the same lot. So if the principal use is a single-family dwelling, then it's just a house. If it's a big building or a manufacturing situation, then it's something different. But the principal use is easily determined by just the examination of the applicant's situation. So what do you want, is 51%? I mean, Didn't we vote 51%? No, we did not vote a percentage, we just voted on the general definition of accessory. So, Jim, you're advocating increasing 51%, and Doug, you have some issues with this too. So what's your position on that?
I just think it's as long as it doesn't exceed the 100%. I think if it's less than the primary use, I'm okay with it. I'd like to see, I'm flexible on the number. I just wanted to, I think, I don't know if unless we have another definition of accessory, as long as it doesn't become the primary use, I'm okay with it.
Okay. And Doug?
I'm baffled by, now our hands are tied by this percentage capacity. I don't know.
Well, Doug, we took the vote on the accessory
You're
use
just
a
saying,
couple weeks ago.
you're just saying it shouldn't be,
We did, I know.
there should be no percentage, is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what I've said all along, but I guess I'm in the minority.
Anybody else have feelings on that?
One other qualification that I think that when we're looking at this usage, I know we already went by this a little bit, but I would suggest that it should be, when you're looking at the primary usage, we should have a clause in there like adjusted for 100% occupancy. Because sometimes you have a building that you build, and your use is like the town hall or something, and it's gonna be 3 years before you need it, but by the time they have a building up and running and they can do their occupancy permit, they can easily do that adjustment if they're only 75% vacant. That's an easy mathematical adjustment they can do, and we could review it, but it would help if, for instance, they built a great big building and they know in 2 years they're gonna have another use in it. As long as they get the building up and running for a year, then we can, and it's 50% occupied, then we can do the math. So typically, the termination I've seen before is adjusted for 100% occupancy, is what I would suggest.
That should be in.
So, yeah, we talked about, if something is gonna be developed in phases, that we wouldn't want to have them
Do 2 turbines.
to do 2 turbines,
Yeah.
or delay putting the
Yeah.
turbine in until, so should we add some language in there about, that's what you were advocating?
Well, I thought that was my suggestion, is adjusted for 100% occupancy.
100% occupancy is a little different than phases of building.
Right, they wouldn't have the building built, but sometimes, when a building's 100% occupancy, it's using its maximum amount of energy.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Jim.
but the building itself could be, on the site, could be actually increased.
Right, well, that's another whole
Increase the
issue,
size
but
of the
that's a new
building.
building permit.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, phasing it in.
Well, that's
I know.
both, I
Marlene?
guess.
If I can, now, when we do site plan reviews with you, sometimes you'll see area for future expansion or phase 2, and we always have you always tell the applicant you need to remove that, because you need, and especially if you're gonna want real usage for a couple of years to do this, things need, adjusted for 100% occupancy is a really good suggestion, and that's, that's for things like the hospital and everything. That would be very key for uses like that. A second phase or an expansion is a wholly different animal, and we or you never pre-permit expansion. You always make them come back with real data, real plans.
True, but you're not talking about an investment of this magnitude that would be applicable to a future use. You're talking about, so you're gonna increase the square footage, so you need some more parking spaces and that kind of, you're not talking about the magnitude of investment that you would be talking about if you had a much bigger turbine versus a smaller turbine, in my opinion. Pat?
I originally liked the 75% usage, but then there was always the question about, okay, if you're going to possibly expand, or your needs change in one way or another, you're getting many more high-powered computers in, and they suck the electricity up. How are we going to accommodate that? I'm coming to think maybe that 51% usage is a better requirement, because that does allow for expansion of usage and expansion of physical space as well. I'm less concerned with allowing power plants flow into the grid. I really am much less concerned with that as to what we're permitting by this bylaw, as I am with allowing for the possible expansion of the usage, either with the physical space that they currently have, but their usage needs change, or with perhaps pushing out a little bit and allowing for that kind of expansion. With this 51% must be used to keep it under the definition of accessory, I do think I feel, right now, I'll put it that way, a little bit comfortable as I'm thinking about that.
Other comments?
I'm still wrestling with the same thing Doug is. And I just wonder if accessory is, for the purposes of this article, shall mean that the energy produced on a yearly basis by the wind energy system shall be utilized by the principal uses located on the same lot. And as far as preventing anybody using that as a principal source, we have that already in the system's not allowed with limitations. They couldn't set something up and use it as a power plant.
So your definition would not feed any electricity into the grid?
Yeah, I think we.
It's a shame.
Say that again, Marlene?
So the
Well,
way.
yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, that brings back what I had said before. So there's no way we can't word this without a percentage.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah, because that says all.
unless there's any further discussion, I'd like to move forward and leave it as it's defined there with the, on a yearly basis as an addition.
I think you should also add the adjusted for 100% occupancy.
Yeah.
Well,
language.
adjusted for 100% occupancy? I'm sorry, excuse me, I
Yeah,
forgot that.
that's okay.
Okay. Is that all right?
That's good, yeah, that's,
Okay. So then, adjusted for 100% occupancy. Rich, again?
I thought we were moving on to small wind energy systems.
Yeah, we are.
I would change that and the next one to read as follows. Small wind energy system, for now only, 0.3 and X kilowatts. Larger wind energy system between X kilowatts and Y kilowatts. And come back with some better numbers that we can all agree on.
Okay, the 10 kilowatts and the 100 kilowatts, Marlene, were those somewhat ballpark figures that other communities have used, or manufacturers have used, or?
This is getting back to rated capacity and how there's no agreement really on what terms these are, micro, small,
Yeah.
utility. These are not terms that there's any agreement on that I can find.
Really?
Not across the country, not across the literature. I know there are, groups have definition, and if you want to adopt a definition from a particular group, that's fine, but I think you need to, but as long as you realize you're adopting this group's definition, and this is not an industry standard.
The bylaw, the sample bylaw that was developed by the state's Energy Commission, yeah, does that have a definition in there of that? I don't remember, I mean,
Of which one? What's the definition of what?
of small and large?
Well, what they have
as
for
far as
definitions
kilowatts?
is, utility scale wind facility is a commercial wind facility where the primary use of the facility is electrical generation to be sold to the wholesale electricity markets.
Yeah,
That's the one that we didn't want.
right.
But we chose a different route, because we're Falmouth, so we had to say it's an accessory. And now
No,
we're.
but that was a definition of utility. That was a definition of utility.
Correct, I'm just saying,
We have that. We defined it as that.
I'm just saying, we've got this accessory use thing where we probably could have skipped that whole thing and just indicated that we didn't want this utility scale wind facility type
But
structure.
it doesn't give a kilowatt,
No, it doesn't.
it doesn't. It does not give a number. Okay.
Not on that one, no.
Okay,
And nowhere in this whole bylaws or any relationship to restricting the amount of generation.
all right. Okay. All right, well then, Rich's proposal is to leave the 10 kilowatt in the small open for further discussion, and also in the large, as the bottom portion of the large wind energy systems. Is there any more discussion on that, Bob?
I think we need to draw a line in the sand somewhere. I mean, we can go on and on with this, and
Well, if Marlene says that there's really no standard out there in the industry, and there's, it's all over the map as far as what other towns have decided, then, you know, we can just, I mean,
You do
yeah,
have
Rich?
to draw a line.
Yeah,
Yeah, you just
Rich?
need to decide.
I wonder if we couldn't, staff couldn't contact Palm Electric and just, or who is it?
and Star right now.
Right.
this week,
I'm still back in the 20th century.
That's okay.
If couldn't just get from them some data as to what the average small business in this town is using and the average,
Have you ever tried calling in stars? And I'm not joking.
But anyhow,
is there some way we could find that out? Maybe we could ask the Chamber of Commerce if they could solicit their membership because, to give us some indication as to what their needs are. Because when we put a limit on this, as Doug has suggested, we really want to have some kind of handle on what the real need is out there. And right now, we don't have it. And as long as we put the small standard, small energy system standard, consistent with the more or less average need that exists in these kinds of uses in these districts, then we're being rational. And if we put the upper limit in the industrial district also, so maybe if somebody could just canvass these people, or at least a good cross-section of people, get somebody to report back to us, well, this is how much electricity I use, this is how much, and get a fair number that we can hang our hat on. That just makes much more sense than drawing the line in the sand, as Bob says.
I did find here.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, excuse me. I did find in the general requirements, special permit granting authority, no wind facility over 60 kilowatts of rated nameplate capacity shall be erected, constructed, installed, or modified as provided in this section without first obtaining a permit from the special permit granting authority. This is the state's recommended.
so anything up to 60 wouldn't even require a permit, special
Right.
permit. Okay,
If you want to rely on that, we could just say that's the small system and you do require a permit, but because we want to look at lot size and everything,
Right.
and so we could say 0.3 and 50,
Or 60 is what
or
it
60,
is.
0.3 and
60,
60. I could live with that, but I also think it would make a lot of sense if we actually went out and found some way to get public input as to what, from business owners and people that would be, I don't think we need to get residences, but from the kinds of owners that would be in these districts as to what their actual usage is.
yeah. Jim?
I'm sorry, I got another idea, I gotta quantify the 100%. I also think we need to look at it in a different usage. We really looking at British thermal units or BTUs, because if we only look at the electrical usage, we're only looking at that, they might think that they only want to use electricity for a certain function, but we should take a look at their overall BTUs, because now once they get wind power, they can convert other parts of their air conditioning or heating, they could choose to do it electrically instead of using gas. So, we have to look at the energy usage of the building is in BTUs and not just on the electric meter, because once they have that power source, they're like, say they had gas heat or oil heat, they could eliminate it if they wanted to, if they're making electricity. So by looking at it as a BTUs that they use for the building, that way it could be sized properly. In other words, it could provide 100% of their, or whatever the percentage of it.
That would be up to the applicant, though, Jim, to to do those calculations and to come to us and say,
No, but if
we're
we-
gonna convert, and so that,
No, but we-
therefore, we're,
We could
you know.
encourage the use of that power, though, by giving them it as an option.
Well, we're not saying that they don't have that option,
Okay, so
you know. If they're smart and thinking.
then they have to do it up front.
Then you gotta, yeah,
Okay.
you know, I'm saying the onus in that case, in my opinion,
Well, they
is on
should-
the app.
Right, that puts it on there. I agree with that.
Marlene?
I do want to, there's a switch in the thinking here that needs to happen. The sizing the generator to the building is the accessory 51%. That's when you need to know real power usage. These small and large are gonna be critically important when we start talking about impacts in the districts. So when we start talking about tower height, when we start talking about decibels, when we start talking about your standards, those standards are gonna be tied to these small and large ranges, whatever they are. That's when those performance standards are gonna be tied to. So we don't need, it's not important to know the actual usage for necessarily for these definitions. It's important to know the actual usage to determine that they're accessory and that they have threshold access to you. These definitions are important to know which districts they're allowed in and then write your standards for those districts correctly. So there's a little bit different ways of looking at, you're doing a couple of things here. One, the accessory use, you're matching the turbine to the power usage. The small and large, you're determining where they can go in town based on their impacts.
Yeah, Marlene, would it be possible to talk to the state that developed this sample bylaw and ask them how they felt the 60 kilowatt a number was applied, where they were talking like, that's sort of like where we cut off. They might have done some studies, you know, I mean, that's a state organization that's not gonna publish something like that without doing some
And-
serious background, you know.
And we have talked to them.
You have.
And I can tell you that this model, the Massachusetts Model Wind Bylaw, I think was not adopted, but made available for local adoption in, I think it was 2006 or 7 is the date on it?
It's not on it.
Okay, I have the date, the date it was made available. And, as you all know, in 2005 and 6, this town itself was going through these permitting processes for a turbine, and that information was not available. And this model bylaw is not from 2011 and 2012.
You're saying it's dated, no?
It is. It's from, I think it's from 2007. It might be from 2008, but I will double check that for you. And they were operating under the same basis that the town of Falmouth was at that time, that these don't have detrimental impacts. And I think when we get to the hearing stages, you're going to be receiving some different information from that.
Is this what Barnstable's using currently?
The
Born.
Cape Cod Commission? Or
No,
the
Town of
Barnstable?
Barnstable. When I went on their website to see what they were doing, this is all I found.
They may have. I know the town of Mashpee, when they adopted the Green Communities Act, they just adopted that wholesale.
Right.
They just verbatim. And that was a conscious decision not to do that here, based on our real experience.
Yeah. Rich?
Yeah, we are not saying, well, as that bylaw says, as that model bylaw says, you can build up to 60 kilowatts without even looking at it. We're not saying that. We're saying,
No, I
we
know
would be
that.
saying, what Doug has proposed, and I think it's reasonable to say, we will commit between 0.3 and 60 in these districts.
Yeah, that's true.
Subject to special permit review under all these other standards. in which case that's where we put in the controls.
Your range is totally up to you.
Right, so, okay. All right, so we need to decide then whether you want to change the 10 kilowatt, which is the top on the small wind energy systems and is the bottom for the large wind energy systems, whether we want to change that up or down. And if you don't want to do it now, then I don't know how else, if, as individuals, if you want to do some more research on it, if you want to have the staff try and figure out a different number with some guidance, then fine. But what do you want to do?
I propose we change the high end of 10 to 50.
To 50, okay? Anybody else with that? Anybody, do you think a 50 kilowatt system would be, if it met the other criteria, would fit in the zones, the zoning zones that we've already agreed to?
And I'm also willing to, leave it, as Richard said, to be determined later, if we feel like we're not ready, but just to get something moving.
All right, so 50. Rich?
I would suggest if we do it now, we make it 60 solely so that we would be in line with the state's standard, whether or not that is,
Oh, that's not a standard, it's a model for local
Well, yeah, 'cause to be
adoption.
in-
There is no state
to
standard.
be in line with the state's model,
All right,
Yeah.
where they don't even require any permit, so, just to be consistent with that for
Okay, that's-
however valid that
I
is.
agree, I'll agree. with
Okay, I think what's missing here, because I'm having problems with upping the small to 50 or 60 kilowatts. Small, when I've got some other things here that, they're all over the place. I have no problem with keeping small between the 0.3 and the 10 kilowatts. We've got no problems with the 10 kilowatt towers that have been erected so far. And I'd rather keep the small definition that way, but I think what's missing here, that I think is driving me a little bit nuts, is medium,
I agree.
okay?
is what, medium?
Medium.
You want to add another category, in other words?
I think that would be helpful to us.
Just don't go supersize.
No, that gets people
Well,
fat.
then you're gonna go back, Pat, to where is medium allowed in what
That's the
zones?
problem, but
Move some zones.
otherwise, I'd just as soon leave it as it is right now.
That makes sense, too.
Other comments?
I would suggest on the low end, you say less than 10 or whatever the number, rather than putting a bracket on the low end. It doesn't make any sense, but 0.3, that's a pretty small.
0.3 is irrelevant?
I'd
Less,
say
so
less
you're
than
saying
Less
whatever
up
the
to,
number
up
is.
to 10, up to 10 kilowatts?
Well, the utility scale is greater than, so the low end should be less than.
The only reason there's in there is, the exemption section, number 2, wind energy systems having a rated capacity of 300 watts or less, or building mounted, requires no review. So, small wind energy systems require a special permit. That's the way this is set up. So, there are turbines that are 300 watts or less, and those just go, you don't want to see those at all. So that's
So
why
you're
that
saying
bottom
that
number's in
the
there.
real small ones, we don't want to deal with, that's what you're saying?
I mean, if you want to remove that exemption and take those two, then yes, by all means, less than 10.
Where is that, Marlene, that you said?
The applicability / exemptions,
Okay, yeah,
.2. Yeah, paragraph 2.
300 watts, yeah, I see it, okay. Are exempt, okay, right.
And
So
that-
does that make sense then, Paul?
It's a pretty small unit.
Yeah, I know.
So you might want to make, the flip side is you might want to make that exemption bigger. If you think a .3 is something that you don't want to see, then make that exemption bigger, and that will change that bottom number.
Okay. All right, so we have two
You don't want to deal with that.
proposals. We have one, leave it from .3 to 10, and the other one is go from .3 up to 60.
No, wait. No, the proposal that Doug made was 50. I said that should be 60.
And I agree.
Between .3 and 60.
That's what I just said.
Yeah,
I just said that.
No, I thought you said remove the .3.
No.
No, I didn't, no.
No, okay, all right.
I said from .3 to 60. So how do people feel about that?
I
Any,
move it.
any objections to that? You object.
I object.
Anybody else object to going to point?
Being around the 10 kilowatt machine, I keep it the way it is.
You'd leave it the same way?
Yeah.
Okay, and you two want to increase it, and how about you guys?
I can go either way, I'm just listening to right now other people's points of view.
Paul?
I think the low end is important. I think that, we have no basis to go to 60 or 50 or 40 or something. So until we define that, I think we leave it the way it is.
Well, the 60 was out of the state's energy, what's their title?
The model amendment to the
What
zoning
is it?
ordinance bylaw.
I'm sorry?
The model amendment to a zoning ordinance bylaw.
No, I know, but what is the name of the agency that developed the bylaw?
That
Oh,
was-
Division of Energy Resources,
Okay, the State Division of Energy Resources
which is
recommended.
part of the Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs.
Right, okay, and they recommended 60 or above requires a special permit. Yeah,
Right.
Rich?
And there's no date on that document.
No?
No.
I would then go back to my original concept, which is, for now, we just leave these definitions to be small wind between .3 and X kilowatts, and large wind to be between X and Y kilowatts.
Well, that's just leaving it, that's not making a decision.
No, and
That's
and
not
I don't
making a
think,
decision,
I
and
think,
I'm
as
not-
as Bob said, and I thought that was very accurate, when we have 10 kilowatts, all we're doing is drawing a line in the sand, and that is arbitrary.
Well,
And that is arbitrary.
but the staff has
And as Doug has
indicated to
pointed
us.
out, he has a friend that is in that is in one of these ag districts who needs 50 kilowatts. He's got the space to allow for adequate siting in there, only he wouldn't be able to do it under this standard.
And it's
I
not,
think-
it's not that he's a friend, it's just, I know he's this guy who has got
It doesn't matter if
agricultural
he's a
land,
friend or
so I
not.
asked him
Yeah.
what the question was, his
It doesn't matter,
situation.
you can talk for your friends on
I'm
this
just
board.
saying.
But he has somebody that he knows that has a need for more than what this would allow. And to say that we're gonna cut that off at 10 in these districts is just arbitrary without knowing what the demand is out there, what the real need is. If we're gonna draw a line in the sand, well, let's err on the side of allowing the need to be met within the constraints, the other constraints that exist because of the controls we have on citing these things and other performance issues. Let's err on the side of allowing more power to be generated within those limits that we can impose.
Okay, Marlene?
At this point, leaving this as an X and a Y, I think is totally fine, because we all know that we're going into the public hearing stage pretty soon, and based on the testimony you receive about what your citizens want to live next to or don't want to live next to, that's your job here. That's an appropriate way to make public policy, saying, we had dozens of people come out and say, this is what we want in our neighborhoods, and that's how zoning works a lot of times, and we know that's coming soon.
Yeah, okay. Other comments about that?
Yes. one
Yeah,
other-
Rich?
As Marlene says, we are going to have the public hearing, and I forgot about that. That is also the opportunity for the people who have the need for this power generating capacity to come in and tell us
Yeah.
what their need is.
All right, so that's the last option. We've got 10, leave it as it is, go to 60, or leave it open. Jim?
Just to move forward and to help get to a decision and listen, that we'll have a chance to revisit this when we have public comment and we learn more. And I want to help get more energy. Maybe we adopt Doug's thing, throw it out there and see what happens, because we could change it either way. And so I think to do an X and a Y is kind of dodging it a little bit. I think we got to stick it out there and make a decision. And so that's my thought.
I think there's a point there, because when we publish this as a draft and people read it, they can say to us, 60, 10 is not high enough, 60 is too high or something. But if we give them a number, if we just throw it out there with no number at all,
We're gonna get
it
100
could be
of them.
all over the
All
place.
right.
You could be here for 3 hours talking about that. So personally, I think Jim is right, that we should stick a number in there and then let the public discuss it.
So now then,
And don't
So
give
we-
it an X or Y or
So we
Z.
have a number there, and
We have a number there now.
for now
So-
then, let's split the difference and say 25.
No, we're not doing that, Rich. We're not doing that.
Well,
We're either
that's-
we're either gonna leave it at 10
Yeah, so
or go to 60.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm gonna ask you to vote on. That's, we've had it with this.
Yeah.
So, okay, now, we're gonna leave it, all those that wanna leave it at 10, say, or raise your hand.
I'll just leave it just because the
Okay.
public hearing.
Okay, and those that wanna go to 60, raise your hand. Okay, it's 60 it is. Okay,
Subject to change.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
I would just want some number there.
okay, that's fine. Okay, now, there are any other comments on any of the other definitions?
You need to do the same thing for large then.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, no, I already did that, yeah. Okay, any other comments on definitions?
Are we gonna increase the large wind high end, or?
Well, we went up 6 times on the small, we might as well go 6 times on the large.
No, we could leave that,
I don't think so.
we could leave that for now, as long as we understand that's gonna be ridiculous.
Do you want to discuss it, Doug?
Well, I do, I just thought it sounded small. I don't wanna
It
be.
sounds small.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
I'll make a motion, let's make it between 60 and 200.
is there a second for that?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion, Pat?
okay. The reason I like this, I'm gonna tell you this, is that the Economic Sustainability Committee met with the Woods Hole Research Group. They have a 100 kilowatt tower. And I didn't realize this, but they have had to gate it down because Treetops was getting horribly annoyed. People on
Because
our
what?
street- Treetops was getting horribly annoyed. They have an agreement. They've had to gate it down. I don't know to what extent they've had to. But at that point, I stopped accusing my husband of thumping his feet on the floor, which I realized was the turbine. And we're about 900 feet away.
Right.
Okay. So that's 100 kilowatt that they've gated down to, I'm not sure what. They're not getting the power output that they wanted. And we, being responsible, have to realize this too, because we are, by zoning, protecting the people of Falmouth. So if we bump this up and call it large, then, well, anybody can come in with something that is going to be a horrendous nuisance.
No, but we still have the protection of the other zone.
Maybe we do, or maybe we
I
don't.
think we do, and that's the only reason why I'm making the decision, because I asked that question. If we don't, then this sizing is be-all and end-all, but it isn't. It's all the other rules that fall into place.
Yeah, if I can, the problem with the Woods Hole Research Center is they're an exempt use, and they would be an exempt use even after you pass this. So for zoning purposes, they're a really bad example because they're an exemption to zoning. Now, if it was not an exempted use under zoning, that's RB, and a large energy system, whatever the range is, would not be allowed there under this bylaw. So you have to remember what we're doing here, and you're putting certain sizes in certain districts. Going forward, someone in an RB zone who is subject to the local zoning, which is most people, not that particular landowner, but they wouldn't even be able to ask for it in that part of town. They could only ask for something in this range we're saying right now, public use or light industrial, the A, B, or C.
Okay, yeah, Rich?
No, I think.
Okay. All right, well, again, we're gonna have, the same applies, you're gonna have the public input here on this. And so, you have a number, if there are people in the town that think it's too small, they'll tell us. And if they think it's not, if it's,
Too big, they'll tell us.
if it's okay, then then they'll indicate that too. So we have a number there now. I mean, we have a motion to go to 200, and did you second it, Doug?
I will second it.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion to go to 200 on the high limit of the large wind energy systems? Any more discussion on that? Okay, if hearing none, then all those in favor of raising it to 200, raise your hand. And opposed? Okay, so 4-3 passes.
200.
We go to 200, okay? All right. Other comments on that, on the definitions? Any of the definitions? Bob?
I think we're ready for prime time. I think we're gonna get a lot of input when we open this up to the public, and I think we're gonna end up changing some of this as a result of that anyway.
Sure.
I don't see why we need to keep going over this and nitpicking all these little things, because I think we're gonna get hammered on some things, and some things people are gonna applaud us for.
Okay, well then,
So I think it's fine.
okay, then I just move on to the next paragraph where
Chairman,
we had,
could I ask a
Yes.
quick question? If you're raising the large wind to 200, then the utility scale starts at 200, is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
What- If that's a utility, what do you consider the one we have at the wastewater plant? That's 10 times bigger.
A monstrosity.
I thought that was utility. How's the term utility used here for a relatively small turbine?
Well, if the turbine that's located at the Woods Hole Research Center is not by any means a small piece of machinery, and that's only 100 kilowatts. So, I mean, those ones at the wastewater treatment plant would be called mega energy systems.
I thought that was a utility
Yeah.
grade.
Well, it is, actually. That's the correct name. for
It is a megawatt, anything, right?
It's 1.8 megawatts.
Yeah,
But that's
165.
utility grade, and I'm wondering why we're defining utility so much.
Well,
10
I don't
times
know,
smaller.
we haven't gotten into the definition of utility, I guess, but we've designated it ourselves. I want to move forward now. Rich, I really want to move forward.
Yes, but I want to make a point. I don't see where we have a definition of utility scale. I don't see where that comes into play. I think we just,
Prohibited?
It's prohibited.
it doesn't say prohibited utility scale, it just says prohibited larger than, in fact, we took that out. We took that out, so I think we should just take out utility scale wind energy systems, period, and just stay with the only ones that are allowed are the small scale, the large scale. We don't have to say we don't allow utility, because the large scale is gonna be capped at some point, and that's gonna be the cap.
Okay, does that make sense to you, Paul? So we're going to scratch utility scale wind energy systems under definitions.
That's a netted justification for increasing from 100 to 200.
Say that again.
That's a netted justification. for
Yeah, right, yeah,
increasing.
okay. All right, going down to applicability and exceptions, we're going to strike or the Board of Appeals. In going to the last page, page number 3, under engineering details, you said the load calculation per mass building code, turbine manufacturer, N-Star, where applicable, actual power consumption over 2 years, Met Tower data 12 months. That's an add that's put in there by the staff, right? I mean, you added that.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain that to us, please?
Well, the load calculation was what Jim was talking about at the 2 weeks ago, you know, on the front end at a building permit stage. And that's still a good piece of information for you to have, to understand what the building is designed for. The turbine manufacturer and the N-Star information are the power curves, the wind speed that is associated with the rated capacity, and all of the specifications on what power is going to be generated at what wind speeds. The actual power consumption over 2 years, we've talked about, and the Met Tower data, We're asking for 12 months because we just know that our summer winds are different than our winter winds.
Yeah, right. Okay,
Well,
yeah,
with the actual power consumption over 2 years, there's no need for me to have the load calculations. It's already covered. It becomes redundant.
It is redundant, and if you want
I
to,
didn't see that before.
it wasn't there before. But if you want to remove load calculations, you can do
Not
that.
necessary if you're gonna have the 2 years' worth of history adjusted for 100% occupancy, you already got it.
so we're gonna eliminate the first line, load calculation per mass building code? Is that acceptable with everyone? Okay.
Yes.
I asked Marlene today whether or not, since we have noise modeling and flicker modeling, whether vibration modeling and ice throw modeling should also be included. And she indicated that it might be in a different part of the bylaw. Is that right?
Right. Remember, we're kind of breaking this up into a quarter section at a time, and Brian and I actually have a much more extensive outline that we've put together, and there's an entire section on environmental impacts and infrasound, if we can find anything, and vibration and ice throw. Those calculations will be handled in the environmental impacts.
Okay,
That's where we're proposing them right now, and then once we
Right.
get into them, you can move them around.
so why wouldn't noise modeling and flicker modeling be part of the environmental?
Because
Barb?
those are things, as part of the application, we want those right up front. So this bulleted list is under application requirements.
Yeah.
So you might decide in some cases, these are required for every single turbine you're going to be permitting. Right now, that's what we're suggesting. It may be the case on small turbines, you don't need a vibration analysis or something, but but those environmental consideration, impacts, it will give you the choice of requiring more.
Okay.
These are things we want no matter what.
Okay, yeah, Rich?
Yeah, vibration is a real concern. Ice throw, I will remind everybody that in the year 2011, there were 600,000 wind turbines in operation worldwide. In the year, there were exactly 140 out of 600,000 accidents of any kind involving wind turbines, and most of those, the vast majority of those, were construction accidents.
Right.
The incidence of ice throw injuring somebody is minuscule. I think if you're going to deal with ice throw, all you have to do is say, we will want to see an insurance policy that will cover anything, including ice throw.
Okay,
And that's all I think we have. We don't have to start talking about ice throw standards.
okay. All right, we'll get to that later.
One more thing for the,
Doug?
I'd like to add that you should have certification for your equipment.
Oh, yeah, we have a whole maintenance and operation section coming too in the later parts of the.
I'm just saying that, it could be a part of the application process, that they know that they should have certification for their turbine that they're proposing to use, because we could get some turbine that's made in a backyard somewhere that's not gonna perform like it should.
I mean, if that's something you want right up front, we can certainly add it to this list too.
I would
Sounds
suggest
like
it.
sounds like it up front should be up front, don't you think, certification of the, and who certifies
The
those?
Small
You
Wind
know-
Certification Council.
Who?
The Small Wind Certification Council.
Small wind,
Certification Council.
Is that an engineering organization?
I don't know, it's just something I found online that
Mr. Chairman?
they check out your equipment and tell you whether or not
who's
it's
gonna
gonna be good or
certify
not.
the large ones?
We must have some engineering.
Yeah.
I don't
At
think
the
so.
risk of going backward, you're raising the issue on the definition of rated capacity. I think we should define who determines that. Rated capacity
Manufacturer does.
determined by the manufacturer?
It comes stamped on the plate, yeah.
But we should state that. Who determines what the rated capacity is?
Rated capacity, maximum rated output of electric power.
That should be
Manufacturers.
determined by the manufacturer.
By the manufacturer, okay.
So there's no question about,
Okay, good.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
We don't want to rely on simply something that is stamped on a plate that's put on the equipment. We need paper documentation that's put in the file so that in case things do not,
Oh, yeah, no, I know that, and you are just seeing the beginning of this bylaw, there's a lot of
okay,
this technical information coming, but the definition of rated capacity is something that is on the nameplate provided by the manufacturer. That's the definition of
but
it.
we want it also in the documentation, specifications that we put in the file.
Right, but that's not his question was about the definition.
Okay.
Who's certifying, who's rating it, and it's rated by the manufacturer.
Marlene, in the procedure for review, the bullet there, it says that the special permit granting authority shall alert the owners. Does it say who pays for that, or is it understood that the,
It's the applicant. So remember when we did, when you set up the zoning for senior care retirement district?
Yeah.
Then we had to come back and set the fees for it?
yeah,
So once this is adopted by town meeting, you'll have to set, what is your permit fee for this? I mean,
Okay.
these are gonna take a lot of work, there's gonna be costs involved.
yeah, right, okay,
And all of that's,
okay,
will be associated with the fee.
all right. Okay, well, that wraps up the, our review for the wind energy systems for tonight. Next time we look at this, we're gonna be looking at the next section.
Well, May 5th, you've got regulatory work, so you'll be doing plan reviews. So we don't, and then we had talked about going to public hearing with this and
Oh.
getting the public hearing started and then working on the next section, so. the
Holding
next-
public hearings for different, as different sections as we go through it.
Yeah.
I've forgotten that.
Is everybody still okay with that?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
So before we move on, because if you get some,
Right.
if this changes significantly, that's gonna impact things down the
Right.
line.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda then are committee reports. Anybody have a report? We're going to put this on the agenda every time, and if you don't have any reports, then we won't have any reports, but at least it's there if someone wants to say something. And so are there any committee reports? None? Okay. New business for items in the future. Committee assignments. We have to consider people that are working on the local comprehensive plan. And the intersection project hearing, there was one already and there's one coming up. So when the second one has been completed, then we can get a report from the staff.
Actually, I wanted to tell you that the Stop and Shop hearing is next Tuesday instead of the planning board meeting, so if we would like you to come. It's the day after Memorial Day, so the planning board's not meeting, but it is the MassDOT's hearing.
And it's going to be right
It's
here.
in this room at
Right.
6:30, so if you are free, I mean, these two intersections are gonna be a $4 million construction project, so it's, the input from the planning board is good, so if you can make it, it's here next Tuesday, 6:30.
6:30.
And the planning board,
Who's having it?
The hearing is held
DOT.
by Mass DOT. It's,
Department of Transportation. The planning board, I think, will be making some comments or recommendations to the DOT about these intersections. So we need to be right up to speed on it. I went to the last one, and I stayed for an hour, and I got a lot of good input, and I've also had some thoughts on it that I ran by the staff already. So it's a good idea if you can make it. If you can make it, the one coming up is going to be over here on the Jones Road Stop and Shop intersection. The other one was up in East Falmouth.
Was the one at Davisville well attended?
it was.
Yeah, it was, very good. A lot of business owners, there was an attorney there representing one of the property owners, and a lot of residents there, because they at the drive through that intersection all the
Stop
time.
and Shop's a bigger problem, actually.
Yeah, well, I don't know, the staff feels that Stop and Shop is gonna be an easier sell. I don't know, we'll see.
So the Stop and Shop intersection is not as it's not as residential. I mean, both corridors are commercial, but there's a lot of residents who access their houses at the Davisville
Right.
lights who are very interested. And we haven't been getting as much turnout at the Stop and Shop lights, even though the Stop and Shop lights probably have a larger town-wide impact. It's not, I mean, everybody practically, I think, has to use those.
Right. Also, I will be seeking reappointment as the planning board representative to the Community Preservation Committee. If there's someone else interested in it, then certainly you're entitled to be considered. Okay, that's it for new business.
No, I need to hand these out.
Oh, yeah,
Everybody did
Excuse
get
me.
these by email, but I just
Yeah.
want to give you paper
Just to
copies.
make sure you all
Right.
have them.
I have mine, and I've already gone over it. These are the local comprehensive plan review committee has come up with the goals and policies for energy and water and sewer. And so you need to look those over and be prepared to make comments on that when we get together at our next meeting.
We're not going to do that tonight?
No. Paul, what we do under new business,
Jim?
under new business,
Just
what
one
we
page.
do is we, the open meeting law pretty much did away with new business on the same night that you discuss things. So new business is always about future things. And so, we're going to have to,
We'll put it
the
on
things
for
that
the
are, the
next-
things mentioned under new business will be discussed at a future meeting. And so, okay. In correspondence, I didn't see a correspondence folder, so I don't believe there is any, is there? There was a bit of correspondence per se received via email where where Webner, the Waquoit Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve, requested the planning board to take a survey that they published online, and I took it today. and so
I did too, I completed it today.
If the rest of you would like to, and it has to do with education and developing, I'm guessing, some kind of future policies and so forth regarding the coastal ponds and coastal.
Did everybody get that email?
I did.
I did.
You
Okay.
got it by coastal resources, or
Yeah.
coastal resources, I guess, is the way they define it. So if you haven't received that, then you should. Let me see here. I believe that's all. Thank you, Pat, for doing that, and there's no other, and Marlene, and if there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.